Life is funny how you have ideas about ideas, where you know you're onto something but can't quite put your finger on it. These ideas about ideas can point you to ultimate truths, but you perhaps aren't talented enough as a linguist to really articulate it in a cohesive fashion. Thus, these thoughts float around in your head as notions but don't often land into concrete ideas until you have an epiphany. I had one of these epiphanies the other day, a quintessential enlightening moment. I wanted to share this as I hope you can use this to change your life for the better. In April of 2020, I decided that a good hobby for me was shooting a handgun. I grew up with a .22 rifle and BB guns as a kid. My father was a hunter. We would go in the woods and shoot shotguns, my .22, and had a lot of fun just doing target practice. I had a great childhood really, riding motorcycles, playing in the woods a lot, and frankly being a lot closer to nature than most kids today. Anyway, the pandemic caused my hobbies to get cut back, as two of my favorite activities are going to yoga classes and concerts. Thus, I thought about what else I could do for me time, and I realized that the shooting ranges were still open. Thus, why not gain a new skill? It is difficult normally to buy a gun in California, and was extremely difficult at the beginning of the pandemic. I finally found an open dealer with inventory and stood in line for over an hour to no avail. Talking to people in line, I learned that when any dealer got inventory, a swarm would show up to buy everything. People were really arming up for the zombie apocalypse apparently. I decided to buy one online, but in Cali you have to get it shipped to a dealer. The dealer is required by law to check your firearms safety license, and if you don't have one, you get to take an exam. The exam is easy by the way, but it took a total of about 2 months to secure a gun in early to mid-2020. Shooting is a bit of a humbling experience at first. The guns are loud. They startle you, even with ear protection. I bought a large handgun only because I couldn't find a 9mm for sale that would ship to California. One thing that is very apparent at first is that shooting is a lot harder than it looks in movies. You have these targets that you've seen, and at first it is difficult to even get half your shots to hit the 2-foot by 3-foot target, and the bullseye in the middle is much harder. I kept going to the range throughout the pandemic, but after about a year I felt like I had peaked, and by that I mean that I stopped getting better. To make matters worse, I still really wasn't very good, definitely below average when I compared my bullseye hits to others at the range. At this point, I did exactly what I did when I peaked at playing guitar many years ago. I took a lesson. I am someone who likes to venture into something, see if I like it, figure it out on my own, and then seek assistance to get to the next level. I found a retired Army shooting instructor and we went to the range. The instructor watched me for about half an hour, making a variety of observations and suggestions, and eventually said, "I want you to try something different." He then asks me to shoot like Alexander Hamilton, meaning that instead of my torso facing the target, I was perpendicular to it. My position was like it would be in the Burr-Hamilton duel basically. Boom, my accuracy improves easily 50%. The instructor looks at me and says, "What does this tell you?" I replied, "I guess it tells me I need to shoot like Alexander Hamilton." He chuckled and asked me to try again. I do try again, and the results are even better this time. Once again shooting like a country squire in an 18th century duel. My instruction now stops me and explains. Shooting a handgun is an unnatural thing. There is an explosion going off a couple feet from your face. It's unnerving. When you shot in the Hamilton style, the gun was now maybe 3 feet from your face. That extra foot of distance made you less nervous. I went home, thought about this a lot, and slept on it. My problem with shooting was that I was not enjoying the bullet coming out of the gun. I was flinching just a bit, just a tiny bit, as I didn't like the explosion. Stoicism teaches us that our reaction to an event or stimulus is more important than the actual event or stimulus. Say for example, your boss yells at you in front of people at work. You can curl up on a ball and cry, go into a screaming fit, or calmly ask for a future meeting to discuss. If you handle it correctly, the damage isn't multiplied by your actions as it is with a hysterical person. Most every negative situation is much more manageable if handled like a stoic. I realized that I had been afraid of the explosion of the bullet coming out of the gun, and I needed to change my attitude about the explosion. I needed to eagerly anticipate and even love the explosion. I changed my reaction to the shot being fired from negative to enjoyable. I took a physical stance where I felt that I was helping the bullet come out of the gun. I felt like I was pushing it out of the gun by pulling the trigger, and this changed my accuracy considerably. I went back to the range in a few weeks, and I couldn't believe it. With one attitudinal change, I was now one of the really good shooters at the range. An hour into this next shooting session, I even noticed the marshals were treating me differently, as one asked me to watch out for a newbie shooter to make sure he was following the rules. It was crazy to think that now others were treating me differently due to my demonstrated skill. I was in a virtuous cycle now. I was now a real shooter with real skills. All I did was change my attitude. Instead of cringing mentally, waiting for the bullet to leave the gun, like an observer of the shot, I was making the bullet leave the gun. I was now controlling the situation. I was enjoying it and getting the positive feedback of seeing better shots hit the target. Why I love this story is that it was very measurable in a very short amount of time. If only things like our careers or personal relationships have the immediate feedback of a bullet hole in a target. Well, things that are more complicated really are a collection of thousands of interactions, mostly with other people. Think about how you could either love or dread a tough project at work. Liking or loathing something is just as basic as being afraid or not being afraid of the explosion from a gun. It's your reaction that matters. Lastly, and I'll repeat myself, your reaction to a situation is more important generally than the situation itself. Put that in your pipe and smoke it.